All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Drought in the Midwest webinar. My name is Molly Wolozin, and I coordinate the Midwest Drought Early Warning System at NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, and I'm located in Champaign, Illinois. I'm with the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences at the University of Colorado in Boulder. This webinar is part of a series of bi-monthly drought webinars designed to provide stakeholders and other interested parties in the Midwest with timely and relevant drought information and resources. First, just some housekeeping items. On this webinar, all attendees are muted. If you have questions during the webinar, please ask them at any time using the Q&A feature on WebEx, which you can find by looking for the apps and Slido. We will have time at the end and also actually after our first two speakers to address any questions that you will have. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and the webinar recording will be available on the NIDIS YouTube channel and linked from the webinars page on drought.gov. We will send an email when the webinar recording has been posted as well. So today's webinar will include 3 presentations. First, we'll hear about current drought conditions and impacts across the Midwest from Austin Pearson, the Assistant State Climatologist in Indiana from Purdue University. Next, Mark Fuchs, the Senior Service Hydrologist at the National Weather Service in St. Louis, Missouri, will give us an overview of the drought outlook information. And finally, today's last presentation will be given by Elizabeth Kirby, who is an environmental engineer at the Missouri's Department of Natural Resources. She will give us a presentation on drought and public engagement in Missouri. And then finally, at the end, we will wrap up with some questions and answers. So I wanted to take a quick moment to highlight the partners that help make this webinar series possible. The partners across the region are instrumental in the development of these webinars, and the products and services that they provide are pivotal in staying updated on conditions across the region. Before we begin presentations, just a brief background on NIDIS. NIDIS was created by Congress in 2006 with a mandate to help the nation prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS does this through a series of activities, including the coordination of the Regional Drought Early Warning Systems, or DEWs, shown on the map here, and through support to improve drought predictions and forecasting, drought planning and preparedness, and assessing the impacts of drought. All of NIDIS's work is done in collaboration with a wide range of partners at all levels. Today is actually a very special day for NIDIS because we are officially beginning our year-long 20th anniversary celebration with the launching of a new drought early warning system in the Mid-Atlantic region. So finally, in addition, NIDIS hosts the US Drought Portal at drought.gov, and the Drought Portal provides up-to-date drought conditions across a variety of scales, provides interactive maps, historical drought information, and much more. Next, if you came across this webinar in any other way than a direct email to you and you want to receive the recording and other information from the Midwest DEWs, I encourage you to sign up for the Midwest DEWs listserv, and I believe the link will be put in the chat box. You might also be interested in some of our other newsletters like Dry Times and the Tribal Engagement newsletter. You can also stay informed on news and events from the homepage of drought.gov. This is where you can find access to our latest news stories, upcoming and past webinars, sign up for email lists, and access regional drought status updates from NIDIS and our partners, as well as the National Weather Service. Understanding on-the-ground drought impacts is important for accurate drought monitoring and response. One thing that we always like to plug on the webinar is a way for you to report your drought impacts, and one way you can do that is through the Condition Monitoring Observer Report System, or CMOR, which is hosted by the National Drought Mitigation Center. You'll hear a lot more about CMOR in Elizabeth's presentation later today. Another way to report your impacts is through, if you're a CocoRa's observer, you have the option to submit a condition monitoring report. Both of these are great systems, user-friendly, and it really helps us understand what's happening on the ground across the country. Okay, so without further ado, I will now pass it off to Austin for the first presentation. And just as a reminder, please add any questions that you have along the way for our speakers using Slido and the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those after Austin and Mark present. Austin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Molly. And wanted to just say that, thank you to NIDIS for allowing us to join on the call today and present. Um, as Molly had said, I am the assistant state climatologist, recently appointed back in December. Just kind of a promotion that Beth Hall, our state climatologist, said was a long time coming, and I'm glad she gave me the opportunity to do that. In addition, the Midwestern Regional Climate Center is also located at Purdue University, and I am a climatologist at that center. So you'll probably hear and see a lot of different products that are available from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center throughout this call today. But I do have a few pictures of really low ponds near my kids' gymnastics facility that we've had here as a result of drought conditions over the past year, and then also just very dry falls. And so we've got a picture of a combine harvesting soybean field in central Indiana down at the bottom. So I did take those photos, but that's what we'll be talking about: drought impacts and how we're kind of shifting away from that, but some lingering effects of the dryness that we're experiencing. So I'll begin with a look at current drought conditions across the Midwest, focusing on what has changed over the past month or two. And then we'll step back and place those recent improvements into a longer term context, looking at conditions over the past 1 to 3 years. While the short term picture has improved in many areas, the longer term signals still show that parts of the region continue to carry a fairly strong drought legacy into the growing season. And so, one of the things that I wanted to show here on this particular graphic were the precipitation departures. And more interestingly, over the winter months, so that December, January, February timeframe for center normal maps, you can see that over the winter months, most of the Midwest trended drier than normal. There were a few exceptions, though, particularly in parts of Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. But overall, winter precipitation did not do much to rebuild the soil moisture, especially deeper in the profile and the groundwater supplies. But since March 1st, we've seen notable shift in that pattern. So many areas have received between 200 and 400% of normal precipitation, with localized pockets approaching 500% of normal, especially up in the Michigan area. That surge in precipitation is the primary driver behind the recent improvements in the U.S. Drought Monitor. That said, the pattern has not been uniform, though. As you look to the south, portions of Kentucky, along with portions of Missouri and Iowa, largely missed some of the more significant March storms. And these areas have actually seen degradations in drought conditions as much of the rest of the region has improved. Next slide. Temperatures have also shifted noticeably. During the winter months, much of those Midwest experienced near to below normal temperatures, as you can see with the map on the left. And then the colder than normal conditions were located on the eastern portion of the region, while areas like far western Iowa leaned somewhat warmer. Since March 1st, though, we've generally transitioned to above normal temperatures across much of the Midwest, especially in the southern portions of the region. Some cooler pockets do remain further north, but overall, we've seen warmer early spring pattern that has increased evaporative demand relative to the winter conditions that we are going out of. So you can see here that we've got temperatures down in southern portions of Indiana and Kentucky and southern Missouri that are more than 8 degrees Fahrenheit above normal since March 1st. And so we've had several days already with 80-degree plus temperatures, high wind, a lot of sun that have led to high evaporative demand across the region. Next slide. Looking back at the snowfall for the season, many of the areas across the Midwest did see adequate snowfall. The problem, though, is that a lot of the moisture content in the snowfall it wasn't very high. So we had some drier snowfalls that we've contended with, and they really haven't improved the drought conditions too much. You can definitely see, though, that there was an uneven pattern across the Midwest. Some of the locations, including parts of the eastern Central Illinois near Champaign and portions of the upper Midwest observed above normal snowfall totals. However, large portions of the region finished the winter with below normal snowfall. As of early April, there is still some snowpack across the far northern portions of the region. And if you look at northern Minnesota, we actually had more snowpack over the past couple days, and it has begun to melt as the warmer temperatures have moved into the area. And so that as that snow melts, we may see some localized runoff and minor flooding concerns in parts of this upper Midwest. But at this point, we're not really expecting widespread flooding. And you may hear more about that here in the next few slides after I get done presenting. Next slide. So looking at the progression of the U.S. Drought Monitor since December 1st, this animation shows how the drought conditions have evolved since the start of winter. So at the beginning of December, you can see that about 34% of the Midwest was in drought. Conditions gradually worsened throughout late winter, with drought extent peaking around March 3rd, when roughly 38% of the region was classified in drought. And at that time, we had fairly prominent corridor of D3 or extreme drought stretching from central Illinois through Indiana into northwest Ohio, along additional pockets in Missouri. And many locations, especially in Indiana where I'm located, this was the first time that we had D3 or extreme drought in the area since 2012. So pretty long time since we've had that in our particular area. But when you look at the conditions since early March, we have had repeated precipitation events that have reduced drought coverage significantly. As of early April, drought coverage had dropped to roughly 23% of the Midwest. One important milestone is that the D3 has now been removed from both Illinois and Indiana. In central Illinois, the D3 conditions have persisted since early October, roughly 5 to 6 months. So this represents meaningful improvement, even though some longer-term deficits remain. Next slide. So here is the current U.S. Drought Monitor that was released this morning on the left, and this is on the right is the 4-week change map. So you can see that further improvements had happened up in north central Indiana and into the Illinois and Ohio area, with additional degradation down in the Kentucky area. So one of the things that you can see in the 4-week change map that it highlights conditions where that have improved most rapidly and where challenges remain. So much of the Midwest shows 1 to 3 category improvements, reflecting the significant precipitation received since early March. And so, however, there are some important exceptions. So as I had said, Kentucky showed degradations during the past month, largely due to missing the recent storm systems that have hit the northern part of the region. We've also seen localized degradations in parts of Missouri and Iowa. So while the regional picture has improved overall, it is important to recognize that improvements have not been uniform across all the states. And we typically don't see 2 category improvements in a 1 week's time. And so in the state of Indiana, from Lafayette stretching over to Fort Wayne area, which is just north of Indianapolis, we had a rare 2 category improvement with this week's drought monitor compared to last week. So pretty interesting changes in the drought monitor as a result of the heavy precipitation hitting those areas. Next, excuse me. Next slide. Long-term precipitation deficits. Let's take a look at those. And this is where the longer-term story starts to dominate what we're seeing in the short term. And so when we zoom out beyond the winter season, the longer-term precipitation signal becomes clearer. So 6, 9, and 12-month departure maps show persistent precipitation deficits centered across the central Midwest, including Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and portions of Iowa and Kentucky, with additional dry signals extending into parts of Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. These maps highlight an important point. Even with a wet March, many locations are only beginning to chip away at the precipitation deficits that have developed during the summer and fall of last year. In several areas, drought conditions persisted for roughly 6 consecutive months or longer, so recent precipitation has helped, but it has not fully erased those longer term deficits. Next slide. Taking an even further look back will show that we're still dealing with the drier conditions that have settled in. So the 18, 24, and 36 months across central Illinois and northeast Missouri and much of Indiana, 24-month precipitation deficits range from roughly 6 to 18 inches below normal, pretty unprecedented. In parts of the Iowa, if we extend the timeline back to 2020 or 2021, cumulative deficits become even larger. And I know I just did this for northwestern Indiana, where we've had some of the D3 lingering, and we had over 30 inches below normal compared to when you're looking at the 5-year period from 2021 to 2025 or 2026. So pretty unprecedented dry conditions over those times, and we would have short breaks where we would get wet conditions, and then we'd immediately flip back dry. And so what that's doing is we're starting to look at groundwater deficits that are pretty unprecedented, and stream flows that are trying to recover but quickly bounce back to below normal. Next slide, please. Looking at the stream flows, these longer term deficits are reflected clearly in the stream flow observations. Now, I will say that these are 1-day average stream flow conditions, looking at many of the gauges across the north central portion of the region at much above normal. This is a rarity over the past few months, as many of these stream flows have been much below normal or even low in some areas. And so this rapid influx of precipitation has been very helpful in that sense. But we also see quick reductions in stream flows as the water rushes out just as fast as it came in. So, when you look at flows often recede fairly quickly back into the lower percentiles after these rainfall events, frequently below the 20th percentile and in some cases below the 10th percentile. Colleagues in Missouri and Illinois have noted that this time of the year typically corresponds to seasonal increase in stream flow. Because the climatological baseline is rising, it does not take much for current flows to fall back into lower percentile categories once precipitation events pass. On the larger river systems, including the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers, reduced base flow has contributed to lower channel levels over the past couple of years, occasionally affecting navigation and barge movements. But recent precipitation has helped improve conditions somewhat, but longer-term base flow deficits are still evident. So, as you can see with the red line, looking at the stage for 2026, we are increasing as a result of precipitation, but still lower than what we would typically see, or the mean stat from 1965 to 2024. Next slide. As I said earlier, these longer-term departures are really starting to fuel these low groundwater levels across the region. And so here you can see the similar story with that in there. The USGS monthly groundwater percentile maps show broad areas of below normal groundwater levels across much of the Midwest, represented by the brown shading on the map. There are some localized pockets of near or above normal groundwater levels, particularly in parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, but overall the regional signal remains below normal. This is consistent with what we've been expect following the multi-year precipitation deficits. The surface conditions can respond relatively quickly to the rainfall, but the groundwater systems take longer to recharge. So we've also heard of reports of private well concerns in parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, which further illustrates the persistence of the deeper hydrologic impacts. Moving on to the next slide. Soil moisture conditions reflect both the recent improvements in the longer term deficits. Recent precipitation has significantly improved near surface soil moisture, generally within the top 10 to 20 centimeters across much of the Midwest. In some areas, including parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and eastern Ohio, soils are now relatively wet and may begin to create challenges for early spring field work. However, deeper portions of the soil profile, approaching 1 meter and deeper, still show evidence of longer-term moisture deficits, particularly in Kentucky, southern Illinois, southeastern Missouri, and portions of the upper Midwest, where the multi-year drought has affected deeper soils and vegetation. We've also received reports of wind-driven topsoil movement in northwest Ohio. Literally looks like snowdrifts. Aaron Wilson sent me a picture. Looks like snowdrifts, and it's just wind-blown silts. There's also concerns related to pasture conditions, pond levels, and livestock feed supplies in some states. In localized areas, dry, deeper soils may also contribute to uneven germination early in the growing season. So while short-term picture has improved considerably since March 1st, the deeper hydrologic system continues to reflect a longer drought memory. Moving on to the final slide, just wanted to summarize briefly what we've talked about here. Drought conditions persisted across much of the Midwest through the winter months, with some areas experiencing drought for 6 months or longer. Above normal precipitation since early March has led to meaningful improvements across much of the region, including the removal of D3 conditions in Illinois and Indiana. However, not all areas have benefited equally, with parts of Kentucky, Missouri, and Iowa experiencing continued dryness. Longer-term precipitation deficits remain evident across many states, reflecting multi-season, in some cases multi-year shortfalls. The hydrologic indicators, including stream flow, groundwater, and deeper soil moisture, continue to show signs of stress in portions of the region, indicating that the system has not fully recovered. Overall, conditions are improving, but the Midwest is still carrying some degree of the drought legacy into this 2026 growing season. With that, I will pause for questions. Otherwise, if there are none, I will pass it back to Molly.
Great, thank you. And we'll come back to questions after Mark for you too. So thank you so much, Austin, for that great overview. I really appreciate it. And I did want to mention also that earlier this week, we had a call with all of the state climatologists and agencies from across the Midwest, and they were the ones that helped us with a lot of that on-the-ground local information that Austin was able to present today. So thank you to all of those partners as well. Okay, so next I will turn it over to Mark, who will give us an overview of the drought outlook information. Mark?
All right. I hope you can hear me. All right.
Yep, you sound great.
Super. Thank you, Molly, and hello, everybody. For the most part, I have good news to share today about those areas that have had deficits and are trying to recover from drought. Let's go ahead and move on to the first slide, which is the new drought monitor for the Midwest. And there's a lot of improvement on this map, especially across Missouri, parts of Illinois, a good part of Indiana and Ohio are now drought-free. Same thing in the entire state of Michigan, upper and lower peninsulas. Most of Wisconsin is drought-free, except for the far northwest there. Still some issues across northwest Iowa and southwest Minnesota and into northeast Minnesota. So areas where we would like to see additional rainfall here in the next month or so would focus down south, down along the Kentucky-Tennessee border and into the southeast part of Missouri and along the Missouri-Arkansas border. Also on a stretch from northwest Missouri across north-central Illinois. And as Austin was referring in about conditions across northern Indiana, especially around Purdue, some drought areas there that extend all the way into northwest Ohio, although they only have D0 left in Indiana and most of Illinois and Missouri for the most part. Just some isolated areas of moderate drought left after the beneficial rainfall we've had so far. Southwest Minnesota and northwest Iowa also with an area of D2, and northeast Minnesota up into the Arrowhead there and across just to the southwest of Duluth and back in the northwest Wisconsin, a fairly large area of D1, and then there's some D2 there just west of Duluth. Next, we'll take a look at the precipitation outlook, and day by day from the Weather Prediction Center. This is relatively new information, came out in the last hour or so. And we see a likelihood of significant and beneficial rainfall across the lower peninsula of Michigan and along the Illinois Wisconsin border and into southern and east central Iowa, all places that could use the rain, especially across parts of Illinois and into the Iowa-Missouri borders we pointed out a minute ago. There's also some decent rain across western Missouri. Day 2, we're expecting that frontal boundary to sag south into the Ohio River Valley with significantly less precipitation. The heaviest rainfall for day 2 would be right along the Ohio River in that band along the front, and most of that is well under a quarter of an inch of rain, not particularly significant. In fact, most of the rainfall in day 2 is not significant, except for southwest Iowa and northwest Missouri, and parts of southeast Missouri, where there are areas of better than a quarter inch, and in some areas up to maybe a half inch of rainfall, but most areas around a tenth of an inch or less. Day 3 is looking at another shot of significant precipitation up across the upper Great Lakes from northern Wisconsin into the upper peninsula of Michigan. That entire area expected to get upwards of 3/4 to an inch of rain on day 3, and really that's the main story across the upper Midwest for day 3. There's a little bit of rain expected for Iowa and Missouri, but most of that's under a quarter of an inch. Iowa, northeast Iowa may be getting a little more than that, and southwest Missouri maybe a little bit above a quarter inch there. But much of the Ohio Valley, in fact, the entire Ohio Valley and into southeast Missouri getting nothing at all on day 3. Now, when you add days 1 through 3 up, it looks like this. We are expecting significant precipitation again in the upper Great Lakes, and then spreading down into east central and south central and southwest Iowa and into the western and northwestern part of Missouri. And many of these areas are going to get some drought relief in this time frame. A lot of these areas currently experiencing some significant drought. The have-nots down into Kentucky really don't get much days 1 through 3, and they really won't get much for the entire 7-day period here. Let's go ahead and move on to day 4, and we'll see mostly light precipitation expected then. More significant rainfall would be confined to the Great Lakes and into the lower Ohio Valley, and then a little bit into south central Missouri along the Arkansas border. But by and large, we're talking only up to about a tenth, maybe 1/1500th of an inch. Not very much at all. Day 5, things get a little more interesting, especially in the Great Lakes again. Wisconsin's expecting up to an inch, maybe even a little bit better than that along the upper peninsula border, and that should extend into the upper peninsula and into parts of the lower peninsula. So significant rainfall of better than a half inch to up to an inch plus into that region. Most of the rest of the area doesn't get much, maybe up to a quarter inch or a little better than that across parts of west central Missouri and also into parts of central and central Minnesota down into northeastern Iowa and northern Illinois. Day 6, things get interesting once again, and we see more widespread beneficial rain across much of the Great Lakes, but this time it gets down into northern Illinois, northeastern Iowa, and across a good part of north central and west central Missouri. So many of these areas getting better than a half inch, and some areas getting up to an inch or better. So that leads us to day 7, when we're expecting another light rainfall day, scattered showers across much of the Great Lakes down into the Ohio Valley. The heavier precipitation actually down into south central and maybe even southeast Missouri, which really could use it. It's about the only rain I think that southeast Missouri gets for the entire week. So if you add all this up, days 1 through 7, we see basically those 4 areas I highlighted earlier, the areas that need it the most. Let's go ahead and bring those out. The first area down across the Missouri-Arkansas border to along the Kentucky-Tennessee border, they do get some significant rainfall into the western end of that circle, but the eastern end of it, especially along the Kentucky-Tennessee border, not nearly enough from what they really need. That extends into southeast Missouri, a quarter inch of rain is well below what they typically there for a normal or an average week in mid-April. That second area from the Missouri-Iowa border to northwest Ohio across northern Indiana and north central Illinois. Illinois and the Missouri-Iowa border do just fine in the next 7 days, it would appear. Um, Northwest Ohio, not so much, but at least they do get some rain, probably on the order of a half inch to an inch in those areas. So close to normal precipitation there. The last two areas up in the northwest Iowa, southwest Minnesota, and northeast Minnesota, northwest Wisconsin, a mixed bag. The northwestern parts of those circles not really getting enough rainfall to do much, to add up to much help. But the southeastern and central part of those circles do look beneficial. Moving on to the CPC outlooks for the next several periods, the 6 to 10 day outlook looks fairly decent from Missouri all the way up into the Great Lakes, Illinois, Indiana, northwest Ohio, really looking at a likelihood of getting above normal precipitation in those areas, getting closer to normal across northwest Minnesota and southeast Kentucky. Warm temperatures through that period. The 8 to 14 day outlook is looking warm, continued across the entire area, except maybe far northern Minnesota, where it'd be closer to normal temperatures up there, but above normal on precipitation across Minnesota, Wisconsin, into the upper peninsula of upper Michigan, and into the northern part of lower Michigan, likely to be above normal. And really, the favorite category for the entire area is above normal, except for Kentucky, south of the Ohio River, most likely going to be closer to normal precipitation. And they probably would be happy to see that, considering the lack of rain they've had. Moving on to the monthly outlook, and much of this is indicative of what we've already had, especially from northeast Missouri into the Chicago area, above normal, a likelihood of above normal rainfall there. But looking at the bigger picture, it should be above normal for the entire month from southwest Texas all the way up into the upper Great Lakes area. Unfortunately, Kentucky, equal chances of near normal, above normal, and below normal, and they could certainly use the rainfall there. If we go out to the 1 to 3 month outlook, the 90-day outlook shows equal chances for much of our area as we extend this through the summer, with the best chances for above normal precipitation being into Ohio and lower Michigan. It should be warm throughout with equal chances of temperatures up near the Great Lakes. Now let's take a look at the drought outlook for the month, and this is really the same for the month and for the 1 to 3 month period. We're expecting improvement with the areas not expecting it necessarily, with drought persisting down into southeast Missouri, into northwest Iowa and southwest Wisconsin, where drought categories are above, above just moderate drought. They're looking at D2 or D3 in those areas. That's all I have for this outlook. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now, or we can move on. Thank you.
Great. Did you want to quickly cover the seasonal? I mean, it's not much
Yes,
different.
it's basically
But
it is basically the same.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
With like I said, southeast Missouri down into the Boot Heel, northwest Iowa, southwest Minnesota,
Yeah.
looking at drought persisting in all likelihood over the next 3 month period.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for that overview. It looks like right now we don't have any questions, but just a reminder to please use the Slido app in order to ask any questions that you might have. And we will come back, since I don't see any right now, to questions at the end after Elizabeth presents. So let me go ahead and advance here. I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, who's going to give us a presentation on drought and public engagement in Missouri.
Thanks, Molly. Making sure you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Like Molly said, my name's Elizabeth Kirby. I'm an environmental engineer with the Water Resources Center, Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And so as the Water Resources Center, we operate out of the state water plan as well as the drought mitigation and response plan. So those two documents are our center's driving documents, and in both of those documents, they have recommendations for improving drought and flood monitoring. So one of those ways we're doing that is through conditions monitoring observer reports. So if you want to go ahead and click to the next slide. So what is a conditions monitoring observer report? So it's a citizen science reporting system to view on-the-ground conditions in localized areas. Who hosts this? So the National Drought Mitigation Center hosts this product in partnership with NIDIS and USDA. Anyone with connection to the internet can submit a report. So it's open to the public. Why do we use this? So the reports are helpful for the US Drought Monitor weekly authors. They help to ground truth all the data products that they are reviewing every week. In Missouri, our state climatologist is Dr. Leeser, and he is the one who creates the map every week. And he reviews 10, 15 plus different products to make improvements and degradations to the state map. So Seymour is the way to help visualize the data with raw evidence. So where in the state do we usually see these? Typically, we get them pretty good in the southwest section, like we can see there. Ideally, we want to see more in every county during every week of the year, but we take what we can get. And how do you submit a Seymour report? You can do this through the Survey 123 app on your phone, or you can submit reports through your desktop. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. More specifically, how Missouri uses Seymour. We use them as the triple check to all the data products and can be used as a sort of compass if any data in an area is unclear in the drought severity. We've had many conversations with Dr. Leeser and Mark about what is useful for these reports, and some information is more useful than others. So from those conversations, the most important pieces of the report are making sure you have the correct location. So the survey can use GPS to pinpoint you, but putting in an address is much more reliable. Also, wide-angled pictures of the landscape to give context to the scale of the conditions. Close-up photos don't always give the context needed. A little story about that, I think it was back in 2023, we saw a report that had a close-up photo of dry, cracked soil, and then the next photo was another wide-angled picture, including that area with the dry, cracked soil, and we saw that that was a farm pond. So that a dried up farm pond is typically seen in moderate, severe conditions, and dry, cracked soil like foundation, that's not typically seen until D4. And so a saturated soil that typically has water in it is going to crack under less drought stress than foundation soil. So just that added context is really helpful. So wide-angled pictures are what they're looking for in those reports. Also, reference photos are very helpful. So this gives context to what the area looks like during normal conditions and can make it easier to discern what extremely wet or extremely dry look like in a given area. Also, descriptions of the conditions. What are you seeing? If dry conditions, what tells you that it's drier than normal? Or if wet, what tells it's more wet than normal? And then also filling out the report as best and fully as possible is great. And the more reports, the better, obviously. But when these reports flood in week to week, especially during dry weather, Dr. Leeser only has so much time to comb through these reports. So he tends to stick to the wide-angled pictures and descriptions when he's short on time. Also, Missouri DNR has had an increased interest in Seymour in recent years because we want to do what we can to support drought monitoring and the mechanisms that trigger aid for all known assistance pathways during drought. So in previous drought years, under an executive order, DNR is able to open certain state parks for haying, some water bodies for pumping. Soil and Water Conservation Program also has voted to allow variances to their policies and programs during drought times. So for example, they allow grazing in the livestock exclusion area, and they can also vote to have cost share assistance and farm pond cleanouts to remove sediment. So those are some things that we typically do as DNR, but we also want to support triggering assistance from other agencies, such as USDA, Farm Service Agency, when it's appropriate. So by educating the public on Seymour reporting and best practices, we can support Dr. Leeser with using useful localized data in an effort to make the drought map as accurate as we can. So the drought map is the trigger mechanism for the FSA programs such as ELAP and LFP, and these are dependent on how long a county is in the drought severity category. So long story short, LFP is the livestock forage program. A county needs to be in D2 for 8 weeks, beginning April 1st to trigger this financial aid. And then ELAP also needs to be in D2 for 8 weeks. And this is consecutive too. So that's why it's so important to get county level information to make sure those triggers are happening when aid is needed. So MoDNR uses Seymour as a means to promote drought monitoring and supporting drought map creation. Let's go to the next slide. So these are some examples of our efforts to gather more reports. We held a Seymour training in 2024. We advertised this to state agencies and mostly anyone I had emails for, honestly. We wanted to work to target every single county, and we noticed that Missouri has state emergency management offices as well as soil and conservation offices in every county. So that was like our main audience we were targeting to. Also, to note, Missouri state employees are required to have at least 20 hours of training. So we mentioned this would count as a training hour, which likely helped in our turnout. My goal was to have 20 people join this session, and over 90 people ended up joining, so it was a pretty good turnout. I brought in Kelly Smith with National Drought Mitigation Center, and she gave the Seymour overview and showed how to submit a report. And then Dr. Leeser and Mark also spoke, and they gave their perspective on what they like to see in reports and how that helps the U.S. Drought Monitor creation. I also, after the fact of this training, I had a decent number of questions and interest in Seymour for a few months after this, so I think that was a pretty good session to have, and we might need to have another one of those. But that was one way. We also do a lot of presentations on drought-related topics, and every time we do one, I make sure to plug Seymour and CocoRa's. So a couple of examples of places we do presentations. We do presentations for different state agencies, different commissions, forums have all reached out to ask us to present on how drought relates to their respective agencies. And then, like I said, during all of these, we pretty much hammered the point home about how important it is to report impacts during drought and how everyone in the state can contribute to this. We also, even during, I think it was 2024, 2025, we had garden clubs reaching out to our group, and I think the president of garden clubs in Missouri reached out to all the garden clubs and said, hey, you talk about conservation for your garden clubs this year. So they reached out to us. We had presentations about conservation, which is not entirely what we do, but then we made sure to plug Seymour and CocoRa's during those as well. That was a good outreach session. And if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about our drought website a little bit. So that's the link for the drought website for Missouri. We do our best to maintain a pretty updated site that contains relevant information. That drought banner at the top is active on all DNR web pages and is a hot link back to this page. So we get some pretty good traffic. On there, we have the drought map, which is updated weekly. We have news regarding executive orders, press releases, different drought types are explained on there. We have our entire drought plan and the action matrix that goes with it. We also have a list of current available assistance gathered from other state agencies and federal partners. And then, of course, Seymour, right below this map on the webpage, Seymour has its own section with the training video link and troubleshooting tips for the app if you're having issues. So we try to make that extremely visible for people to see on the website. So the next slide. We also, MoDNR maintains a LinkedIn and X, formerly Twitter, page. So every time we post about drought, like on the left, we post the drought map. We always include a link, which is that HTTPS that's in blue. We always include a Seymour link in our drought posts. So that's how we try to drive traffic through social media. We also worked with Department of Health and Senior Services for an ad campaign in 2023, including the Seymour link. And then I also liked their AgriStress hotline ads as well, so I included those on here. But they do a great job of getting the message out on social media. So next slide. We also worked with the DHSS on radio ads. So we specifically call out our webpage to have people submit Seymour. The one on the left was during the 2023 drought year. So that was that campaign. And then on the right, Molly, if you want to play the 2024 ad.
I am trying. Sorry, just one second. Of course, it was working.
And we even practiced too.
We did. I know. That's really odd. Let me go back and just try this. Of course. Let me just one second. Let me do this really quick. The X out and share again, and let's just see. Of course, it's not going to.
And that's okay. I mean, the message is essentially the same as the 2023 one, but we specifically...
Rain or shine, we're still all ears for the scoop on what's happening in your neck of the woods. Recent rains have provided some relief from the 3 years of drought. However, we are not fully recovered. Report your local conditions at dnr.mo.gov/drought to assist state and national agencies in monitoring local conditions as we go into the summer months. Get drought updates and submit weekly surveys of drought conditions in your area at dnr.mo.gov/drought. This message from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services.
Awesome. I'm glad it worked.
Sorry if it scared everybody. It was loud there at the start.
Thanks, Molly.
Okay.
So yeah, that was an example of our 2024 ad. That was more specific to the Seymour call out, was the only thing that I wanted to say about that one. So for drought related interviews, over the last 2.5 years, DNR has done at least 30 drought related interviews. And this is just me, so I'm sure people higher up than me have done more of these as well. So this is a lot of interviews done in the form of radio, television, and article interviews. Some common questions that we get are, what are the current conditions? What does the recent rainfall mean for drought? What is the state doing to address this? And then, is there anything you want to add? And if I have not mentioned Seymour or Cocoa Roz in the first 4 questions, I always make sure to plug it in at the end, describing how it's useful for the state and how people can get involved in monitoring. Let's go to the next slide. We also did some boots on the ground sessions back in more so 2023 was the bulk of this. We sent team members out to specific counties, mostly ones that were repeat callers saying that, oh, the drought monitor doesn't represent my area very well. So we sent a couple team members out to these areas to do our own Seymour reporting. We also explained to them a little bit about how that process works. It does not guarantee, a Seymour does not guarantee that your county is going to be in a certain level of severity, but it can definitely help ground truth the data in your area. And we found it pretty common that the people who were calling in these different areas, they were typically the areas that we had data gaps. So Texas County doesn't have any stream gauges, nor does it have soil sensors. And I think it has like 2 Cocoa Roz stations. And actually the farm that these pictures were taken on, I think she became one of the Cocoa Roz users. So that was pretty cool to see too, that she was interested in that. But yeah, Next slide. So during those boots on the ground conditions, we handed out these Seymour cards. We worked with our communications team to get these made. We found that a lot of farmers in Missouri typically do not receive information from the internet. So we handed them these cards with the QR code, but also the URL, because we also found that QR codes were not as common in rural areas. So we wanted to make sure it was accessible to people as much as it could be. So we explained that Seymour helps show your conditions in your area and could help to reflect that on the drought map. So we handed these out, and we handed out extras so they could hand them out to their neighbors and their community. Go to the next slide. So this is always an interesting graphic to me. So this is the US Drought Monitor categories from the 1st of January in 2025 to maybe the end of March there, overlaid with the views, the website views from the Drought webpage. So as you can see, the peak here is during October 5th, 2026. That week had 506 website views. Also note that the month of September is not in there because the view tracking system our website administrators use was undergoing an update and the reported data was skewed, so I tossed that out. But we can probably guess from the end of August to the beginning of October, we would probably see an increasing amount of views to the website. But what is pretty clear from this data is that there's a strong correlation with dry conditions reflected visibly to the public or by the drought map that drives folks to check out the drought website. Go to the next slide. So this is the same kind of map, but this is overlaid with Seymour reports. So it's very closely tied to when we see worse and more widespread conditions, more reports are coming in. So the peak number of reports during this time was between September 9th and the 16th with 289 reports. And similar to the website views, like I said, there's an increase in interest of submitting these reports when the conditions are worse. Missouri's pretty good at getting people to submit reports mostly statewide during pretty dry conditions, so we've got that down pretty well. But what's different from the website views to the Seymour graph is that people are mostly only submitting Seymour during the growing season. So as we can see in January 2025 and January 2026, we see pretty widespread drought conditions, but there are 0 reports. So over the last 2 years, maybe a year or two, we've changed our messaging from submit Seymour during dry conditions to submit Seymour during dry, wet, and normal conditions. So that's the statement that we're kind of using whenever we talk about Seymour. We're not saying dry conditions anymore, but we're also including wet and normal as well. So some key insights that this data helps me see is that it would be helpful to have a conversation on what people should focus on in this Seymour report for each season. So giving people a visual of what they're looking for during the seasons might better connect with them with what they see outside their window, and maybe therefore have improved maps for the whole year, regardless of dry conditions. This also probably tells me that I need to talk with our communications team a little bit and expand from messaging to the agricultural world to the wider environmental science world to gain that wider audience and target folks who are out in the field in all conditions. So an idea I had for this was to contact our volunteer group in the state. It's called the Stream Team. They're a group that volunteers to clean up streams and track water quality around the state. So I think they have pretty good coverage statewide, and they might be able to get some good Seymour reporting during even wet and flooding conditions. So that was one group that I was planning to reach out to and then also targeting specifically field techs in MoDNR and Department of Conservation might be a good idea as well. And then even reaching back out to the garden clubs. They're a pretty good audience, and they might be more responsive to if we explain that we don't need it just in dry conditions, but also in normal and wet conditions. And then if we go to the next page, yeah. So this is not Seymour related, but is more overall drought monitoring related. This is just a shout out to our MOHIC team. Over the past 3 years, the Missouri Hydrologic Information Center has been working on expanding Missouri's soil moisture sensor and stream gauge network across the state in an effort to enhance monitoring capabilities for both flood and drought related issues. They've recently released their flood and drought monitoring website and app. So the link in the top right, if you are on your desktop, you can Google that link and it'll be the first web page that comes up. So the flood portion shows stream gauges, so this is the picture on the left, and their likelihood of flooding at minor, moderate, and severe levels. Andy Schiller is the project manager for the flood monitoring portion and has installed 40 gauges so far and plans to install 45 more by December. And this is mostly by himself, so that's a very impressive feat. For the drought monitoring webpage, so the one on the right, they have soil moisture sensor readings overlaid with the drought map categories, and it gives soil moisture readings from 2 to 40 inches. Amanda Wolfgayer and her partners have 33 active stations and anticipate adding 20 more by the end of 2026. And these stations consist of DNR as well as NRCS, USFS, and NOAA stations, and she dubs this the network of networks on this site. So feel free to check that out. Like I said, the link is on the slide, or Google MOHIC, and it should be the first thing that pops up. So that's drought monitoring related. And then finally, another drought monitoring related note, but also flooding monitoring related. As we all know, the USGS Water Watch 7, 14, 28-day streamflow products were taken offline at the end of February. And these products are key monitoring tools and are heavily used in a lot of different areas, but mostly the drought map creation. And for us in Missouri, it is a key indicator on our drought plan to tell us which phase of drought a certain region is in. So it's safe to say many of us were pretty bummed to hear that this is no longer being created. Thankfully, we have a Python user in Water Resources Center. His name is Colby Thrash, who was able to recreate the product using the USGS tutorial and the HighSuite Python package. It is not an exact copy of the USGS product, but it mostly resembles it, and it does contain the percentiles and colors for streams with 30+ years of data. The website link is on this slide, and Colby okayed with sharing the script to recreate this for other states who might need it as a short-term fix. So if you check out that website, the source code is also on that website. Feel free to take that and use it as you need it. If you have any questions regarding this product or the script, feel free to contact Colby at colby.thrash@dnr.mo.gov. And I think that's all. Oh, key takeaways. So Seymour are the most beneficial with wide-angled pictures of the landscape, a hardy description, and reference photos to normal conditions if they're available. MoDNR will continue supporting language that communicates the need for Seymour during all conditions. MOHIC continues to expand soil moisture sensor networks and stream gauge networks across the state. And Colby Thrash has created a short-term fix that is a shareable script at that website. Feel free to use it as needed. I think that might be it.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate you sharing all of the great things that you are doing in Missouri. I've always found it really innovative, and I just wanted to have other people hear about it too. So great job. Okay, so we are just a minute over, but we do have one quick question, Elizabeth, for you. Someone asked, they weren't quick enough to copy it down, but can you repeat the key points that you make sure to touch on in interviews? And I'm guessing this means in relationship to like the importance of Seymour. If I'm wrong about that,
Yeah.
Sadie, let me know. But
Yeah, so when I mostly touch on for Seymour is people are like, okay, well, I submit it during dry conditions. So what I'm trying to explain during the interview process is Seymour is important because we need that localized data to make the drought map as accurate as possible so that financial assistance can be triggered if it's warranted. So I make sure to explain that process of how Seymour fits into triggering the assistance, and then also you can find it, at the specific website. And if you need more information, NDMC hosts a lot of information and how-tos and troubleshooting tips. So I try to give that process specifically and make it known that it's not just during dry conditions, but also during wet and normal conditions as well.
okay, great. Thank you so much. And with that, I just wanted to thank our speakers one more time for their great presentations. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, June 4th at 2 p.m. Central. And I just put a link in the chat box to register if you know you'd like to attend, and that will also be sent out via email as well. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you, everyone.